Welcome to The Plain Truth, the show where we go into some of the mysteries, anomalies, and the dirty underbelly of the world around us. This week, joining me, we have Mark Dansie, who's well known in the alternative energy field, and not as much of an underbelly kind of topic, much more of a positive one, perhaps, for this time. But Mark, are you there?
Yes. Good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, well, we're across a bunch of time zones, so well, how have you been? We had you on a year or two ago, and lots been going on. What's up?
Very much travelled where what I thought was a small project producing the water technologies for consumable goods turned out to be a cast of thousands and manufacturers and distributors. It's turned into a major project. But the good news is it's very, very close to appearing in your shop or on your infomercial or TV or Walmart soon with technology, and we're releasing a multitude of products rather than just one or two and see how it goes. So that's going very well, but as usual, everything takes a lot longer than you think it does, mainly because of complexities nowadays of regulations and international trade and investment, and it's a big project. And on the other side of thing, I'm still continuing research with various and consulting with various inventors on, let's say, exotic ways of trying to find how to get energy. And finally, I'm involved now, even though I'm not putting a lot of my personal time into it, but I'm involved in a group where we're socializing solar energy, I think would be the best way, trying to make solar energy and wind power very accessible to everybody in a very economic and cheap way, so they can have their independence. So that's about it. So very much travelled. I have to fly to Hong Kong or Singapore or wherever in Asia virtually on 2 or 3 times a month. So doing well.
Good. Okay. Well, you brought up that that project you've been working on for a few years now anyway. So maybe we could refresh people about that. The idea is what? You put water in like a metal, and how does that, just a high level view for those of us who don't know anything?
Oh, that includes me. I don't know anything. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So it's a very simple technology that we've had to apply some very sophisticated electronics and management systems to, of just using a metal or magnesium and a couple other elements, a bit of seawater. You know, the concept's been around for centuries, but we've taken the high-tech approach using modern materials and technologies to try and do away with batteries and kerosene. Around the world, there's 1.6 billion people using fuel or kerosene lighting for lanterns, and they're enslaved to the, fuel companies. This will run at a fraction of the cost, and also it complements the solar panels and chargers that are there in the market. The other thing we're doing is doing away with batteries, so we can have a small piece of metal rod, if you like, the size of a couple of AA cells, and to enable the consumer to run the device that maybe runs for 10 or 20 hours now will run for hundreds of hours, and we can even do thousands of hours, and there's no waste product that's environmentally dangerous. In fact, you get a bit of magnesium out of the process, and we're going to be applying that to flashlights, radios, and small-powered consumer products.
Are there any prototypes out there that, like YouTube videos or anything that people can see?
They will shortly. Filming just finished in America, actually for the TV networks, but not at the moment. The reason being is they don't want to release this. They want to release all the products more or less, or a family of products at once. So everything's under stealth mode. Not because of sinister reason, it's just that they just want to be prepared and make sure stocks are available and everything's in place and before they release to the public what it is. And there is a commercial interest there. The investors have put up pretty big money to get this all happening, and the investment in tooling and manufacturing. And there's a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists involved, a lot of investors. So it's really, there's nothing now, but it's very, very close. I was hoping 12 months ago I could say, hey, it's ready, but the project turned into not one product, it turned into a family of products. And we're just having to hold back until we're absolutely sure that we can deliver. We don't want to overpromise. We want to make sure we can deliver what we've got, as in having physical stocks and in having the product available for everybody.
So you're not the mad scientist behind it.
I guess what I
You're
did
more like
was
the PR man
no,
slash negotiator.
No. We got another team that does that. They wheel me in the room, do a technical presentation, then they kick me out normally. I put this together. I formed the science team. We invested heavily on getting the best electronics engineer to do more efficient circuits and software and management circuits, the technology. And I adapted technologies being used in the military at the moment and applying in consumer goods. So really what I did, we've just employed another scientist to do a new cathode. I'm the traffic cop as far as research and development. That's my role. I also liaise with the manufacturers, making sure our mad science experiments can be actually manufactured, because quite often they can't. So we have to sort of figure out with the manufacturing engineers, hey, this is great. How in the hell can we make it? So my role is traffic cop on research and development. And we have a lab here in the Philippines, but many of my researchers and scientists and engineers reside in other countries like Australia and America.
May I ask how large your team is?
It varies. Some people were contracted out, to do a specific job. So the team, I'd say, of engineers and scientists and research side, not the rest of the company, varies from as low as 4 or 5 up to about 15 at times, or 15 or 16 at any one time. It just varied. Like, we just signed off on all electronics, so the electronics team is no longer involved in the manufacturing. Electronics engineers take over and do the final stuff. And as you develop a certain piece of it, engineers and scientists come and go. So it does vary. It's turned out to be a very expensive project, but the results we're getting are very worthwhile.
Well, speaking of those results, if the commercialization goes well, what can you tell us what we might see and, how it might be used in the real world, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. There's a series of products coming out from later, probably phase 2 will be the more fun ones, like Christmas trees that flash on and off if you water them, and radios and marine lights and emergency gear. But the first phase would definitely be around lighting. There'll be lighting to light up huts for the third world. There'll be emergency standby lighting. There'll be lanterns, traditional camping lanterns. There'll be flashlights. There'll be a variety of products that come out. And what's really cool about them is you can run them for months without having to replace batteries or anything, just a small metal rod at a fraction of the cost. And most of them, depending on the model, there'll be different models. There's the old cheapo, just run on water only, and that sort of will do like a flashlight or a lantern. And then there'll be others that you can charge your cell phone up. And there'll be power packs that you can run, your whole tent side or your whole house. You can put in a couple of lights, charge your cell phone. And I'm working on some smaller ones now that eventually, will be able to hopefully charge your laptop or run your laptop. So a whole lot of consumer products, and just about anything you can imagine that's powered on batteries will eventually come out with this technology.
So is the killer app then lighting?
That's the one that will have the most impact. Like I said, there's 60 or 70 billion litres a year of kerosene being used in small lamps. We want to attack that. We've got something that costs a fraction of the cost to run and doesn't have all the associated environmental and health problems. That's the third world. First weld, it'd be like this. You'll have a flashlight, screw off the top, pour water in, 10 years' time, no flat batteries. You can do this 10 years' time. Pour the water in, or use seawater or dash of salt. It needs a little bit of salt. And you've got a flashlight. And if you leave that running, it'll run for 500, 600 hours, 200 hours, depending on the model. And then, once again, depending on the model, hey, I need to charge my cell phone. Like cell phone chargers, I use them all the time. I have little portable ones. They're good for 1 or 2 charges, but then you need to recharge it somewhere. And I was looking at another company's product recently. I said, how many phone chargers you got? 6 D cells in there. And they said 4 or 5. And I pull out one little stick of the metal we're using. And I said, I can give you 50 to 100 charges with that. And if we want to use a chunk that big, we can do 200 charges. So all we're doing is we're just trying to get away from batteries and environmentally bad products and high costs to something that's very environmentally sustainable, low cost, and very convenient. So rather than have to walk around, one of our sticks is equivalent to about 100 batteries and cost about the cost of 2 batteries. So that's that project. And while I've been doing that, by the way, I've still been analysing and following on exotic technology claims the last 2 years, and I'm still very active in that field as well. Anyway, that's the technology. The advantage is no environmental problems. We're not chewing up resources they need to use to make batteries, and it's the convenience of being able to have something that in 20 years' time will run like the day you bought it, or you can run it for thousands of hours just with a couple of sticks.
Okay, sounds interesting.
Hey,
Matt, you got a
hi.
question?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matt Newhall. How you doing? So I got a question about your flashlights. I know you were working with your company to work on a water-based flashlight. Do you have an ETA on that? And what should people look out for as a gotcha when they're trying to bring something like this to market?
Okay, good question. The second one. The first one, our ETA is October, November. Will be in the warehouses, the first range of products. It could be a lot earlier, but I'm giving you shipping times, delays, to get it around the world. The second question is what to look out for. I think the biggest problem when you're embarking on a project like this is understanding world trade, manufacturing, and regulations. There's a stack load of regulations, and just understanding the engineering challenges. What looks like a simple project, on your benchtop or desk, has unbelievable amount of development that can be associated with it. And just electronics costs a lot of money to get it right. We couldn't use off the shelf. And I realise why nobody's done this before. It's so frigging hard. So every aspect of this, and there's so many things we developed a whole raft of trade secrets that every aspect, how it breathes, how the process works, how does that process interact with the environment, how do we house it? It's required a team of remarkable engineers and scientists to pull all that together, because any previous attempts just haven't worked out. And when you have to be bulletproof as well. So that's been the hard bit. On the distributing side, that's the easy bit. People see this and they go, we want it, and we want a container load now. That's the easy side. The hard side is actually underestimating what it takes to get something from the laboratory table into production. There's a massive process. And originally I thought, this would be a simple project. I'll just build a few and, sell them on eBay or whatever. And then other parties start getting interest. And when the money starts flowing in and the project gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more complex, you have to be on your guard that it's just not running away. You have to keep pulling it back and saying, that's our deadline. We need to be out with these products by then. That's the hardest bit.
Okay, thanks. Is there anything in particular? Is it the global market? Is it the United States market? Is it the protecting intellectual property? Is it supply channels, would you say, or any of those?
intellectual property is interesting. We got some patents on electronics, but a lot of the stuff we're not taking patents on because a patent can take 10 years to defend in court. And then when you do a patent, everybody knows what you're doing because you're telling everybody. We found it's better for commercial reasons. We want the world to benefit from this, but for us to benefit, we need a lot of capital to, pay for the tooling. And it's often better to have trade secrets than patents. Patents can be a pain in the butt. In the US, if you got something really exotic or a new energy technology, I wouldn't take a patent out there because the military can just, government says, oh, we've got a military interest in that. You can't do that. So if you're going to do patents, make sure you do them somewhere else, not the USA.
Yeah, I believe they can. I believe they can and have performed a sort of eminent domain on interesting inventions.
Hey,
absolutely.
Mark, as an aside, many decades ago, part of my R&D work involved researching into them, into government patents. Well, not government patents, but government research. And a general conclusion was that a lot of the information was wrong. It was intentionally wrong.
Oh, absolutely. If you publish a patent, you never
because anybody could steal it. And so big companies, the Dow Chemical, people like that, you can't, the office, the government office doesn't have the budget to actually create, a $500,000 equipment setup.
Yeah.
And so if you tell them that it does this and it does that and the pressure is this and the catalyst is that and so on and so forth, they say, okay. But actually it's not true. And interestingly enough, I was at something like an alternative research environment once, and a guy there was a German guy working on anti-gravity research. And I mean honest, legitimate anti-gravity research. And it was all, regular scientist types. And I asked him what was the most frustrating thing. And he said the most frustrating thing is he feels that they're all reinventing the wheel. Okay. And he said the second most frustrating thing is perhaps 80, 90% of the stuff out there, the information out there is wrong. It's intentionally wrong. It's designed to mislead you. So the idea that having something in a government, patent office number or such and such tells you something, I wouldn't assume that.
Okay, I'll put it this way. When you do a patent, you make sure the process is disguised in a way nobody can figure it out. You're protecting the claim more than anything. And I say to people, don't worry about a patent unless you're changing some fundamental thing at the core of a science that nobody can get around, some little fundamental little thing that is so simple that nobody can get around it. Because everybody will get around your patent. And the defense of that is to disguise everything and put false and misleading information in there, just so long as you've got that patent. But the point is, it's going to be copied. Like in India now, or China. The Chinese are complaining they're having their ideas and intellectual property ripped off by Indian companies. And then the whole world's going, wow, we're really worried about that. What have you been doing to us for 50 years? So it's going to be
bleeds.
Yeah, my heart
I'm sure there are a lot of scientists and companies out there that are just really crying for the poor Chinese on that one.
Oh, yeah, the heart's going, wow, we'll really do something about that. Where's my Starbucks? So I think you're absolutely correct. And the reason people do that, it's not sinister, it's to protect what they've got. When you do a patent, you're telling the whole world. Whereas if I got a trade secret of a process we developed, it's going to, can they reverse engineer it? Yes. But it's going to take them a lot of effort. And if we spend $500,000 developing that process, or $5 million or 50,000, I don't want to be writing it on a bit of paper and saying, here, we just spent $500,000 and you can have it for free. I'd want to put it in a way, you have to do some work to figure this one out. That is a commercial realization. And, the other thing is, if you want to do it so it's free to everybody, and I support that, it's open sourced, as they call it, that's great, but somebody's got to pay the bill at the end of the day. And research is not cheap.
No, it's not. Well, it's interesting. I just wanted to say one quick thing. So I'm very involved with open source, and there's an axiom going around in the open source world along the lines of Yeah, just go ahead. I think this is actually, I'm paraphrasing Linus Torvalds, but just go ahead and do it and worry about the patents later. So that's it. That seems to be the software way of handling things in the open source world. I don't know how that applies, but it seems
No,
in line with what you said.
the commercial, I sat down with a big manufacturer and product developer just this week, and we're discussing the patents. And in the industries that I'm dealing with, and many others I know of, we have this patent conversation and say, look, there's a little bit of electronics we'll protect, that's worthwhile, because you can sub-license that out. But as far as everything else goes, be first to market, or not be first to market, be the best, be the Apple. Well, I'm not talking about Apple nowadays, but the Apple did at one stage bring out very innovative paradigm shift, which changed the whole industries and the way we did things. You've got to be that. You've got to be the market leader. And that's one reason, for instance, I said, we could release, to be honest with you, a product last November, one product. And everybody said no. The manufacturer from China said, one of the manufacturers said no. I said, why? Because everybody here is going to copy it. And I said, oh. And they said, before we get our other products out, they'll all have those other products out. So then I said, what do you want? And the distributors told me the same thing, by the way. We want a family of products. We want to go, bang, here's your flashlight, here's your lantern, here's this, here's that product, here's that product. And then 2 months later, we come in with the next phase of products. So we're actually in the marketplace with a full range of products, and it's all about branding. So branding is more important than the patent. The patents are there, and there's millions of patents, literally millions of patents. The patents are there. Maybe if you invent the laser, the patent on the laser is a perfect example, something so fundamentally simple, it's worthwhile protecting. But everything else will be copied, and that's good. I want our product. None of us have got any fears of our product being copied. We just want to get our money back first, then the whole world can have it.
Well, hopefully some of these products will be on the market. What did you say, October?
Yeah, later in the year. I'm not involved in the distributing, but even if we're tooling up and we're making parts now, even if we're making it now, it takes a long time to get it shipped around the world, to fill out warehouses, and to have the distributing network ready. So product physically, probably next month, but product available later in the year. It's just a logistics issue, nothing else. It's just logistics.
Mm. And are you going to manufacture things in China?
Some will. There's several countries involved in manufacturing parts and components, and several other countries involved. But at the moment, we'll be doing stuff in China. Mm-hmm. And no, it's not my first choice, I can tell you. But it's funny, like industry in America, and I worked and lived in America 2 years, you call up and manufacture somebody, they'll get back to you in 2 weeks. And then they might take you half seriously, and then they might do this. And you go, oh my God, this is so bad. Here, you go and talk to a company in China, and I sat around, there's a team of engineers, there's an electronics engineer, this is from their side of it. There's the head of production, there's this guy, there's a product. They take you seriously, and they use professionals, and they give you what you need. If you're an inventor and you go to an American company, you're going to get bad service. If you go to Asia, not just China, but you go to Asia, Thailand or China or Taiwan or Korea or Japan, they take you seriously, and they'll give you the attention you deserve and put the resources behind it. Whereas in America, I always found you're trying to sell them something all the time, or it's always you've got to convince them what's in it for them. But over here, they get the story, they know the benefits. Okay, their approach is, how can we support you? And there is a big paradigm that, the saddest story, and I know this is a little bit off energy, that I'm hearing over and over again, and Catherine Osman-Fitz and I discussed this last night, they're shutting down the innovation centres in America and even in Europe. Accountants are coming in, and corporations that were founded on innovation are being shut down. Their engineers, their inventors, if you like, their designers, their creative skunk works are being shut down. and they're being transferred on the manufacturers. And several manufacturers I've talked to over here, many industry people, not just this industry, but any industry, toy industry, electronics industry, automotive, they're saying, we used to just manufacture what they told us to manufacture. They'd bring a product out and they say, here, make this. Now they're saying, if you want our business, you have to create the products for us. So they're shifting the innovation, the imaginative team, the creators are being shut down in corporations everywhere because some big boss gets his bonus because they saved a few $1 million by over 2 or 3 years. They saved $1 zillion by killing their innovation center off and killing their engineers off. And wow, isn't this wonderful? And where's my $100 million bonus? But what's happening is all that talent is now relocating, and you can find it in Thailand, in Vietnam, in China, in Japan, and that's where they have to go because the manufacturers here to survive have to become OEM Ds, D meaning developers, not just product manufacturers. So I'm really fearful that a lot of Western countries, in a few years' time, they're not going to have anything. Everything's going to be over here. The talent, you know, I was with a team of designers and engineers the other day. I thought I was sitting in Apple. They're that good. And the company here in Asia assembled that team from Australia, from England, from the US. They brought all the talent, the best talent in the world they could find into here, into this product. Whereas 10 years ago, you wouldn't find anything here, 20 years ago. So that's another problem the West is facing, is the brain drain of creativity. Sorry, I better be quiet.
No, Mark. That's a huge point that a lot of people are not seeing. You know, when you talk about the relative decline of the West or the rise of Asia, so many people still have this idea that, you know, all the best brains from India and China moved to the U.S. And that's a mixed. I don't know that you can make that conclusion. I would say that, first of all, a lot of them do go to places like MIT. But a lot of them come back. And the other thing is, just as you said, I mean, if, you know, wherever the production is done is going to have a huge advantage in getting the design work and,
yes,
you know, higher level engineering, right?
You're correct that people were migrating and going to those companies. But now what they're doing is they're getting educated at MIT. I asked one of them, where'd you get your design degree and where did you get your engineering degree? You know, he had dual degrees. I got that in Australia and I got that in America. So what we're seeing is, I know in Australia, 1/3 of all students are Asian students. They don't stay in Australia and work for Australian industry. After they get their degree, they come back home and work for this industry. And so once upon a time, it was the dream to go to America and live like Americans and get your education there and work for this creative center. Now what's happening is they're all coming back home and they're creating America again. You know, the rise of the middle class in most Asian countries is astronomical. Third world cities, some are first world cities now. You go to many cities here, they're stunning. The freeways are better than you've got in America. And, you know, the traffic jams, pollution, that's all starting again. And people, the rise of the middle class in Asia is much faster than the decline of the middle class in America.
Yes, well, that's, well, you live in the Philippines, right?
That's a different country.
And I don't know if that's Asia. No, yes, it is. But you know what I mean? It's kind of not exactly the odd man out, but it's not quite the same as Thailand or Hong Kong or something. But
bureaucracy killed off this country as far as being an industrial giant. But it's got 7,000 islands and wonderful people, always happy. So I think that's
the exchange. It's a fair exchange.
I'll take the happy people and the nice beach over a high-rise unit
versus living in a little place in Hong Kong on the 87th floor or something. Yeah, I know where you're coming with that. But anyway, it's certainly the case that for me, living in Asia, going back to the U.S., a lot of the country looks like it's in serious decline. I mean, the roads not being maintained, that kind of stuff. Setting aside any political stuff, you know, not just like moaning and groaning about something, just saying like you said, the roads in parts of Asia now are just phenomenal. And they've still got a ways to go, but the trend is unmistakable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, actually. I went to southern China recently, and I went, wow, I was expecting, I guess it's my own preconceived ideas, and I was going, wow, this wouldn't be out of place in any of the most modern cities in the world. What I was seeing, the apartments, the parks, the roads, the cars, and I'm there, wow. And this is happening everywhere. Manila's an exception. Manila's still a dump. But the other Asian cities, look at Bangkok over 20 years. Even look at Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong would probably have one of the best train or public transport systems in the whole world. They move 4 million people a day in absolute fast, clean, very cheap, economical way. It's great. And these cities are getting better, and better. Whereas, I love Americans. I love America. But I see the decline there. I see people struggling. I see people under pressure like I've never seen before. America was a very happy-go-lucky place 30 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. Hey, since you're from Australia, it's worth asking, has Australia changed in a similar way? The lucky country?
They're still rich. I think the average Australia is the most expensive country in the world to live. They have about 4 times more wealth than the average American, I found out the other day, which I find hard to believe. But Australia still is the lucky country. They're still riding on the resource boom, but things are changing rapidly. The resource booms, China's now saying, hey, we're putting a lot of solar and wind in, and we're sick of this black smoke in our cities. We're putting a cap on coal. So Australia's now going, ooh, we're about to lose our income source. We'll try and sell uranium instead to the Indians. So that's what they're doing. But Australia is still a great country to live in, very safe, very stable. But I see some of the decline and the eckings in that I'm seeing in America. Roads aren't quite being maintained, transport systems are failing, pressures on health and education. So where we had 10 or 20 years of free education, free health, the cracks are starting to appear. But I think Australia, they're smart enough to wake up and they'll adapt. Australia's doing a lot of changes rather than just being resource industry based. They're a financial hub for Asia now, or they're putting, computer programming. They're going into other services and industries to service Asia. And they're a very smart move to do that. So I think they'll be okay for a while.
Okay, well, why don't we get back into the energy field? What, outside of the stuff you're working on, what do you see going on that's of most note? All of these solar farms, perhaps, or something else?
What I see is there's a sudden massive change. Like in the Philippines, there was no solar a year ago. Now you can hardly, every mall, every major apartment, they're putting in massive farms and the solar going in here at a rate I've never seen before. Like, it's just huge. And what's happened is all of a sudden solar and wind has got cheaper than coal. Like electricity here in the Philippines is the most expensive in Asia, 3 times more expensive in the US. So it makes sense now, and you can buy solar panels out of China pretty cheap. It makes sense now to put panels on your roof, especially during the day, especially for large businesses and shopping malls, because you can actually get electricity cheaper through PPAs. Companies will come in, put the panels on and sell electricity a lot cheaper than you can buy it from the grid. So the paradigm shift now is the economic drivers. Initially with solar and alternative energy, governments put in subsidies and, in Australia, in my home state in Australia, for instance, South Australia, 20% of all houses now have solar PV, 50% I think have got hot water, and 30 to 50% of the state's powered by wind energy. They had a day recently, late last year, where the whole day they're powered by solar or wind energy, everything, industry, the houses. They did have the generator stations with coal-fired still ticking over, a couple of generators, just in case, and to really balance the grid out. But they're selling that excess power from the generator stations to the neighbouring state. And if you asked me 10 years ago, is that possible, I would have laughed at you. So the big shift now has come that solar and wind and a few other these alternative technologies, if you like to call them, have got cheaper than traditional. And this is causing big problems. Like in America, the utility companies are going, crap, people are putting solar panels on our houses, and we're going to lose them as clients. So now you've got many states being lobbied by these mega corporations, the power companies, to put taxes on people. So if you've got solar, you've got to pay a sun tax. You can't have solar. If you're connected to the grid and have solar, we're going to make you pay a lot more money for the right to be connected to the grid. So what will happen next is
hey, Mark, it's only fair because they're going to tax you for collecting rainwater. And I don't know. I don't know if the technology is good, but when there's an Internet of Things, maybe they can tax you for breathing, right? There'll be an oxygen tax.
I haven't figured that one out yet. But the tax
that one's going to be hard, but the rain should be easy. You can measure it. There are metrics for how much rain will fall per neighborhood, right? So your neighborhood got, 10 inches of rain last year. So, hey, sorry, you got to pay.
Well, you already have to pay in Australia. They charge you runoff. If you got a dam, you got to pay for the license to catch your own water on your own property.
That's nice.
Yeah, they figured that one out. Now, here's the other change of tax. Electric cars in Norway, 20% of all new vehicles sold are electric. In China, they sell a gazillion, tens of millions of electric scooters a year. Now, the current tax system in Australia, they charge about 80 cents US per litre or $2.40 a gallon tax. In Europe, it's even higher. America, it's still low. But if they can't charge you for gasoline tax anymore, what they're going to do, and you're going to see this very rapidly appearing, is they're going to charge you for the distance you covered. So I give you a prediction, within 10 years or within 5 years, you'll have GPSs on your car, and if you tamper with them, the big guys in the vans will come and pick you up and incarcerate you, which is another good industry. But what they'll do is
I predict a resurgence of classic cars. Go ahead.
But what you'll see is they'll tax the miles you cover, measured by GPS or some other technology. They'll tax you for that. They will not tax you for, they can't tax the fuel anymore because people aren't going to be using it in the quantities. So the governments have to adjust to how the hell they're going to tax you for these new technologies. Now, the biggest thing that's happening is if we could get storage cheap enough, capacitors and batteries and the technology cheap enough, then you would not buy a conventional automobile. You could then buy your electric car far cheaper than you'd pay for a conventional automobile because you've got no transmissions and all these bits of metal and all this weight and the gearbox and diffs and all that. You got electric motor, and that's your gearbox. It's everything. The only thing that's holding back electric car are two things: range and also the cost. The battery technology is coming out of the labs now, and there's one Stanford last month, the aluminium battery technology. They're looking at 10 times the storage at a fraction of the cost. So suddenly your Tesla can go, rather than 300 miles, will be able to go 1,000 miles, and you'll be able to buy your Tesla electric car cheaper than you can buy your, conventional car. When the storage comes in, that it's cheaper, and I believe this is the next 3 to 5 years because there's $100 billion a year being spent on energy storage research, that two things are going to happen. There's going to be a major shift away from gasoline automobiles, like in Norway, 20% already. And the second thing is people will unplug from the grid because at the moment it's not all that economically viable to unplug from the grid. If you've got solar panels, you're better off still having the grid connected. But when the cost of that storage drops below a certain threshold, and it's unbelievably close to that threshold now, then you'd be crazy to connect your house to the grid to start with. If you build a new house, if you build a new real estate development, you'd be crazy to connect to the grid. It'd be cheaper to put panels on your roof and have a storage system. That day is very, very close. And already, as I've explained in the Philippines here, there is a stampede, not a rush, a stampede for industry like shopping mall. We've got one shopping mall down the road here 1.5 megawatts of solar panels on their roof. And there was another reason they did that. The government said, if you don't use solar, we're a bit short of electricity here. If you don't use solar, you're going to have to turn your air conditioning up to higher temperature. So suddenly, this 21-year-old kid who started this company installing solar panels, he's got $500 million worth of orders on the books this year already. So, you know, that's what's changing. And this will be the year that you'll really notice that some countries already, it is cheaper to go to wind and solar, not just for the householder, but to build a power station. It's actually cheaper now to put a solar and the wind. What's holding it back is the grid can only handle so much wind and solar because they need to balance the grid. Sorry, I better be quiet again. I talk too much.
Well, no. There's just so many questions and ways to go. I guess a couple of questions. You're in the Philippines, which is the tropics. What if you're not in the tropics? I mean, what if you're in Kansas? Will solar have the same effect? I mean, also, the U.S. has low energy costs, right?
Oh, yeah. U.S. has got the lowest energy costs in the world. Now, here's an interesting thing. I've got a friend in Boston. It's not Wisconsin, but it's cold. It snows. He gets more energy per day in the winter sun than he does in the summer heat because solar panels are more efficient when they're cold than when they're hot. So he actually would get more, even though I might have 2 hours extra sunlight a day here, he may get more power because it's more efficient operating. They're putting them up in Germany. You know, who'd want to put solar panels in Germany that high? Way north, no. And they're going to win because those higher latitudes, they have wind power because there's a lot more wind along the coast and that. Norway is something like, I forget, 90% wind powered now. And you've got to tap into what's available in Iceland. Solar's not a good option there, but they've got geothermal. And even in the Philippines here, geothermal's everywhere. So they're tapping into that. In fact, I think they predicted the other day within 10 years, the Philippines, the grid will be 100% renewable energy, which is a major achievement. But I think that I'm just mentioning solar and wind. There's so many other technologies coming out. Will you see a perpetual motion machine or a magnetic motor? No. Will you see new materials that can generate electricity? Will there be new sciences? Yes, because they're in the labs now. But the big paradigm shift, the thing that's going to take this from, wow, things are starting to change, to where every householder will want solar or everybody will drive an electric car, all hinges around how quick. I mean, Elon Musk didn't spend $5 billion for nothing, you know, to do a battery factory. And he knew well when he was building that the batteries they intend to manufacture there, but before the factory's finished, will be redundant. But because he's got the facility there, he'll be able to take on the new battery technologies and then really make a killing. That guy's a visionary for that reason. And the battery technologies that are in the labs now are huge. The other thing that's coming out is Toyota's backing hydrogen. So there's a lot of new nifty ways to make hydrogen that are very, very efficient that we didn't have before. So there's a big battle with automotive manufacturers. Do we go electric? Do we go hydrogen? So you're going to see some questions aren't answered, but I can see major trends. And then you've got other countries, not the US so much, but China and India are putting in massive amounts of money, private enterprise and governments, into renewable energy. And like Germany, everybody's saying, wow, it's costing us a fortune in Germany. Electricity is still expensive because of this bloody solar and wind. But energy costs is now a major component for manufacturing in Asia, and it will be eventually in the US. You've got a buffer there. You've fracked your way into energy independence. You cracked and got enough gas to say, hey, we don't have to go and invade an Arab country tomorrow. So you've got a bit of energy independence. You've got a buffer there now. But in 10, 15, 20 years' time, the countries that have renewable energy resources will have a huge edge over the manufacturing industries who will be fighting still over coal and whatever, oil, gas, whatever. And if they're importing it, they won't have their independence.
So I got a question for you about Toyota. Why would they suddenly go into the hydrogen market like that? I mean, I know there's some subsidies available, but last I looked, it was very expensive to produce hydrogen. Has that changed? What technologies changed there? What's available now?
No, and I don't know why they've gone that way either, because it will never be distributive. Transporting hydrogen and having the infrastructure is really, really difficult. But there are technologies coming out where I think what they're backing on is they're going to be able to produce hydrogen at the site where you're going to need it, like the gasoline station might be able to have a hydrogen plant there. But it's got me a little bit perplexed with that. They are using electric vehicles still. They're using fuel cells. So you're putting hydrogen to make electricity. I think Toyota, the reason they've gone that way is you can store a lot more hydrogen, get a lot more range than you can with electric vehicle. But the question I've got, which is the same as yours, I'll give an example. The BMW 7 series they had that was hydrogen powered, the cost of filling it up with hydrogen is still 3 times more the cost than filling it up with gasoline, which is many more times more costly than putting electric charging.
Exactly.
So I've got to be, I've got to say, and Toyota is subsidising every vehicle they just released in the US that's running on hydrogen, and they're putting in a massive, massive amount of resources into getting refilling stations all over California at the moment. I think it's a big gamble, but it may pay off. They might know something we don't know. I don't know what that is at this stage, but to me, I'd be buying an electric vehicle and, getting my free Tesla. All the companies now, Tesla set a good trend up. You get free electricity if you go to one of their recharge stations. Now, all the companies are doing that. They're building recharge stations all over the US, so you'll be able to run your car for nothing because they're all competing with each other. Hey, if you buy our car, we'll give you free fuel. I think it's great. But Toyota can't do that because hydrogen ain't free.
I agree, and I've actually had some reasonable debates with other people that liquid fuel is actually superior to gaseous fuel, a gas state fuel. And it kind of brings me to a segue, but it's interesting. I'm kind of curious what your take on this tech is, if you've heard anything about it. Have you heard about Quant e-Limousine? And it looks like they have a liquid electrolyte that is replaceable. So is a liquid electrolyte a better way to go, or is it just solid state and wait for the battery tech to catch up?
I think this is a science experiment. I followed that one quite closely because it overlaps in the technologies we're using. I can run a car on magnesium now and get you 2,000 miles on a single chunk of metal, but it's still 3 times the cost of gasoline. I think what they've got is similar. I think they've got the metal or the anode and the cathode in solution form, but I don't think they're telling the full story. It's not just, hey, just add water or we just do this. I think the
similarities to your flashlight did occur to me. So
yeah, no, there are, and actually I've studied it. And they're not telling the full story yet. And I don't think you're going to see that one emerging. It could emerge soon, but I think the cost factor in that is what's going to kill it. But you mentioned about gaseous state. Liquid fuel is still the best way to store energy and transport energy, and it's convenient. And the other thing that I think we're going to see big time now is a lot of companies, BMW now teamed up with a company in Germany, and they're capturing sequestered CO2, the stuff they're trying to keep out the atmosphere, using electricity and water to make diesel. And here's the cool thing about that diesel. A, it's created out of carbon they've already captured, so they're not taking carbon from the ground and releasing it. So it's a closed cycle. B, there's no sulfur with it. There's no other nasties that come from fossil fuels, but they're going to use excess electricity from the grid or the windmills. When the windmills are pumping too hard and they can't use the power, they're going to be making liquid fuels. So the solar and wind industry they're the new oil fields. You're going to see in 5 years and 10 years' time, the new oil barons will be solar and wind farms, if you like. They'll be the fields of fuel because they'll grab that cheap electricity, they'll grab water, they'll grab CO2, and they're going to make liquid fuels again because it still is the most convenient, cheapest way to transport energy.
Well, what a you. So you really don't know why Toyota's made this bet.
I think they're mad.
Sorry. I think so too.
I think it's a good question. I do have a lot of faith that in Japanese labs behind the scenes, they've had good technology that they couldn't release because of American pressure, military type things and geopolitical things.
That makes sense.
Because I've been into Japanese labs, and I think they're really world class.
They are.
So it raised. I don't know. The answer is I don't know. But one possibility is they made the bet and they didn't think that battery technology would come along as well as it has, or seems to be. I don't know.
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I think it's just a gamble, and unless they really, but they haven't. They're getting the fueling stations put in California, but you're talking about the whole world. You have to change the fueling infrastructure, whereas electricity, you have petrol stations where your solar panels are or where your power point is. That you don't have to build an entire new infrastructure, whereas hydrogen, you have to change or build a completely new infrastructure. Electricity makes sense. Everywhere you go, there's electricity. So I think, corporations sometimes take the wrong bet, and I think this one might be the wrong bet for them. Only time will tell.
Oh, what about this Tesla announcement? The battery thing in the last couple of weeks. What do you have to say about that?
They're very clever. The cost of it still isn't all that economical for storage. It's still better to have solar panels that connect to the grid. It's the cheapest way to do storage. But what they are doing is they're putting out, they're the pioneers, they're the trailblazers. They're putting the railway through. The distributed network, getting people used to the idea, because in another 2 or 3 years, and the technology is there, it really is there, these battery technologies will all of a sudden be there that will make it, you're better off to cut off with a grid and go, somebody will come to you and offer you a deal like their solar company he's associated with. You don't have to pay anything up front. It's like in the Philippines. If I'm a big industry or a house, somebody will come along, put the panels on my roof, put the metering in, do everything else, and charge me less than the utility company's charging. That's a pretty good deal. So what I think he's doing, they've got a whole lot of experiments happening. They're building microgrids. They're getting the distributing network sorted out. I think they're only doing it on a small scale to start with. They're just getting people used to the idea. This is a market leader for the next 2 or 3 years, a lead in to getting people accustomed to the idea. And I also think it was a good strategy that he's invested $5 billion into his mega factory, and he just wants to have his bets covered that, hey, if all these other auto manufacturers are going to cane me with all their electric Teslas that are coming out now, I've still got this industry, which I'm 5 years ahead of everybody else, and I've got a market for my batteries.
Well, that makes sense. Changing gears here a little bit. I think a lot of people are curious about the famous ECAT.
Yes, please.
Could I ask you? I know that's like, full of so many angles, right? But maybe we could go from there and say, you don't have to just talk about the ECAT. How about the general idea of the so-called cold fusion, the whatever, LENR, that kind of stuff?
I got some good news for you, okay?
Now, you used to be or are a skeptic about them, right?
I always said to you and
about
everybody,
Rossi, right?
Well, Rossi, don't put him in the same basket. He's a circus performer. However, there's a lot of legitimate research going on now, and the good news is Japanese institutions and companies, Indian, few little minor attempts in America, around the world, academics and institutions and large companies are taking an interest in this, because I mentioned, I think last time I was on your show, that here's the problem. They've got an effect which nobody understands, and it's not consistent. So 50% of the time it works, 50% of the time it doesn't work. And then 5% of the time, everybody's worked with it. The US Naval Labs, some of their guys said, you would observe a runaway reaction. So the problem, first thing is, nobody understands what's really happening, but they're now making an effort to find out. And a lot of money and resources is being poured in with great scientists and engineers around the world, especially in Japan. And you mentioned the labs in Japan. I agree with you. They're some of the best in the world, are actually now investigating this. The second problem they've got is the consistency, because it doesn't always happen. So you can't really put a power plant in or have your car running, say, well, Tuesday it worked fine, I got to work, but Wednesday, I don't know, it just didn't happen for me. You know, we've got to have something that's reliable. And the third thing is it's an event. The process is actually a series of events. Black light power, you know, they see an event happening. And what they've got a problem is how do you harvest an event into an ongoing continuous process? So I believe LNER still got 10, maybe 20 years, maybe 5. It might be then. They've got to engineer it into a reliable, commercially viable product. But the good news is the clowns are getting out of the way. The Rossies are going and, you know, they're going to disappear. But the legitimate researchers are there. And it's going to become it is now already legitimate science. And some serious and very talented people now say, okay, there's something there, but will it be what saves the world? I don't know. Watch this space in 10 years' time and see how far they progress with it.
Well, do you think there are any, or have you seen any, or even heard of that from somebody personally who watched something? Have you seen anything that looks better than it works every other day? Do you get the feeling that, I mean...
No, Rossi claims he's got that. He hasn't. And he just is a master at doing, he's a master at pulling off publicity stunts and doing show and tells. He never allows the technology to be tested in the way that you need to test this technology. All these other research efforts are testing the technology and gaining understanding by not having something that can fool the public, is finding out what's really happening. So nobody's got a continuous process yet. I think they need to first find out what is really going on and why does it work sometimes and why doesn't it work sometimes. But at the moment, apart from what Rossi claims, nobody, you know, there are some processes that are continuous, I guess, but they're only yielding 1 or 2 or 3% over unity. You know, you need to be 2, 3, 600% continuous. So I think we'll see some very interesting developments in the next 3 years when these serious researchers and companies, there's some big companies in Japan who have replicated the ECAT, if you like, but it only works less than 50% of the time, and they're not getting anywhere near the energy that's claimed. It's only a fraction over unity. But I think I'm very optimistic and positive about this, but I still think we're a decade or 2 away, and then we'll know whether it's viable.
Well, the problem I have with this is, I mean, I don't follow it, so I don't know, but I mean, the explanation given, the 30,000 foot level kind of thing, is that, Rossi found this great catalyst, combination formula. And so if that's true, then whoever in some lab in Japan or wherever Germany is working on it, if you don't know what the catalyst is, I mean, you've got a terrible problem.
They know what the catalyst is, don't worry. They were able to figure it out. Rossi used pixie dust, and it's not very widely available and reliable. These guys already know.
Now, you say that, but I remember as a kid reading in comic books. It was everywhere.
Isn't that a mutagen?
No, pixie dust, I see it used all the time. Every second energy device needs pixie dust in it. But they already know better catalysts than he's got. It's turned into a real serious science now. What he did was a show and pony show, and it always is. Even the academics involved absolutely got torn apart when their procedures were peer-reviewed. And it wasn't because they want to attack the technology. It was because the methodology sucked, and Rossi orchestrated it all. He was the one still there involved, turning switches, doing this, doing that. You know, he's been to jail for fraud. And what I found over the years is anybody who's been to jail for fraud and then comes out and makes an energy claim, you want to really, really look at what they're claiming. But here's the most interesting part that's far more interesting than Rossi. The scientists who worked in the naval labs on this cold fusion technology for 2 decades, a lot of them older and retired now, come out and saying, yeah, it's real, and this is what we did. And they're revealing what catalysts they used and what effects they saw. But the same thing, they said, we can't get it to be consistent or reliable. We need to understand it more. And they've left an incredible amount of data and work that these other researchers can jump on that is real, is legitimate, and they all seen these runaway reactions. We're not interested in the little bit of power. We're interested in where in the hell is all this other energy coming from? And when they find out how and why it works, then I think we're going to see something very, very positive. But it's not going to be a backyard person like Rossi who still has to buy electricity or probably trying to sell his robot factory in Florida or any other of his stupid claims. What you're going to see is real science, real institutions, real companies, and they're going to get to the bottom of it. And I believe it will take a few years, but I think something good will come out of this eventually when they gain the understanding of what's going on. They don't need Rossi's catalyst. They got better.
Yeah, well, it's going to come out of the corporate labs, I'm afraid. In Japan, there was a famous professor, researcher at Osaka University named Arata, who was working on it and had a lot of stuff, but he's quite old now. And basically he was saying that, you know, the policy is obvious that they were going to starve it publicly and the money would be thrown in, you know, hidden labs, so to speak. And, you know, whether they release something or whether they ever get it to work is an open question.
Well, they just did a huge lot of money came into a lab in one of the universities in Tokyo, and it's a joint industry lab, government, industry, and institutional research effort, and they're recruiting the best scientists. And so they are taking it seriously. That was only this year. And they're one of many initiatives now where people are putting serious money behind it and building state-of-the-art facilities to study it. So that's the good news. And that's what was needed all along. Rossi, he hasn't actually got anything. You've got to understand this, that the way they measure it is wrong. If they use normal calorimetric methods, you'd see that he hasn't got anything. It's all BS. But other people have, and other people have got legitimate. I've met people who work in this field and been in their labs, and they're getting legitimate results. But they say, we still don't know what the hell's going on, and it doesn't work every time, and that's got us perplexed. Whereas if something works all the time, then you can figure it out a lot easier. But when it only works occasionally, you have to grab that data and then start working from there. And eventually they'll crack the code. It's just like cracking the DNA code. It just is going to require a lot of money, a lot of effort to crack the code. And when they do crack the code, I think they're going to have something very special.
Yeah, but that might take a while. So another topic I kind of wanted to ask about is there any technology that's kind of, I don't know if you want to say that it doesn't get the PR, but it's interesting. I mean, solar farms, that gets PR. The ECAT gets PR, you know, cold fusion. What about stuff that could be big changes, but we don't hear about it?
You're starting to hear about it now, about the battery and storage technologies and ultracapacitors, the material science that goes behind that. It's just massive effort, over $100 billion a year being poured into that. And the breakthroughs are coming at breakneck speed. You don't read it in mainstream media. Occasionally you do. But the new battery technologies that are coming, they've got them in the labs and they are working. That's going to be the game changer. So what's going to be from going from 5% electric cars to 50% will be the storage technology. What takes the grid. What eliminates the grid and the corporations that control and own and manipulate people through the grid will be the storage technology. So if they don't get the mainstream, people know what solar is, so people know what wind is, but the battery technologies and capacitive technologies. The other technologies that are coming through now are, as I mentioned, the conversion of water and carbon into fuel. It's not only the BIM, I think it was Audi actually, and a company in Germany that's got the pilot plant up and running for that, but even the Navy is using seawater now to make jet fuel for their aircraft carriers. And it's not getting a lot of publicity, but they've actually got, the ability to turn water into fuel. All you need is a lot of electricity and carbon. That's about it. And that's going to gain a lot more momentum because, it's going to be a few years yet where liquid fuels can be totally dispensed of because of the convenience. So I think those ones, as far as exotic and weird and wonderful things, it's the material technologies. They get no publicity, and that's normally by choice. I'm going back to research next year into solid-state materials that, when produced, continuously output electricity. The only problem is, up to date, we can only get very small amounts of usable power. So I think with a bit more research and better equipment and the right scientists, we'll be able to develop solid-state energy generators. So they're the ones I'd be watching. Storage, if you like, electricity and water to fuel, and solid-state or materials technology. The amount of research into graphene now is phenomenal. They're finding graphene can do just about everything. So I think they're the ones to watch out for. What you won't see is a buoyancy-powered machine, a self-running magnetic motor, or a motor. You're not going to see that. And one of the most amazing things I see on my travels is all these people, they put a generator and a motor, they hook them together, and somehow think they can generate more electricity. And it just doesn't happen.
Mark, you're missing the third element. That's what it used to be 20 years ago. Now they've got a GoPro camera, and it's on YouTube. Now there are 3 steps, or 3 parts to the equation. It used to be 2.
Okay.
Your description of Mark, your description of the battery effect in the last interview with Plain was excellent. So I would recommend people go back and listen to that.
I see it all the time, still to this day. Last year we had this quantum energy generator. All these people found harmony, or whatever it was, resonance, that's it. And we're sitting back and said, we found resonance in our first year of electronics, Resonance is normal. It's nothing special, and they're all umming and hugging each other. And they raised about $500,000 through crowdfunding, and they're claiming they've got something they're giving the world is an over-unity machine. And then 12 months later, they were honest enough to say, so it doesn't really work. So what do you do?
I was listening to your description of the being able to close the loop without a battery in it, and something occurred to me. It occurs to me that the Fukushima-style GE plants would not pass that test because they need external electricity to run, and that is their biggest problem, and that is why Fukushima happened. And I was wondering about your thoughts about that. That's not where I was going to go at all, but you segued right into it.
Well, here's the trick. Go to thorium. I think thorium, well, when we say clean nuclear, it's still got a half-life of a few decades, but thorium-powered plants can't have a runaway reaction. They need electricity, or actually need radioactive reactions using up old fuel stocks to keep them running. So you can never have a meltdown, and you've got a waste product that relatively is benign in a few decades, not 30,000 years. And
it's completely insane that they're not only fail-safe but fully physically automated. I don't understand how anyone thinks that's sane. Sorry.
Yeah. And these Fukushima, what's really troubling about Fukushima? The Japanese are about to build new nuclear power plants. They've just commissioned a new one, and they're going to fire up all their old plants.
Hey, we're really bad at this. Let's do it more.
And yet the next headline the next day is park closed in Tokyo because unsafe for children because of high radioactivity levels. Are we learning something here? So they're really like going, we're going to build a nuclear power plant. That hasn't progressed just yet, and I don't think it will. I think the people are going to have something to say about
Mark,
that.
on this topic, though, I mean, I love the sound of thorium, but, you know, can you build a thorium plant now? And then
Yes.
a related question is, I don't know how true it is, but I read in the press about all these Russian deals to build nuclear plants around the world. And they say they're better than the old nuclear plants. How true is that? What are all these plans? What are they actually going to build?
Right. India is about to commission, when I say commission, fire it up. It's fired up, but actually hook it up to the grid. They've got a thorium-powered nuclear power plant already. China's got, one company alone's got 700 scientists working on small thorium power plants. Bill Gates and a few others in the US and companies have invested in companies that will build little thorium nuclear power plants. You'll see at the neighbourhood shopping mall, that will power your neighbourhood. It'll be size of a couple of cars. And that's all moving ahead. In Europe, in Norway, they've got thorium plants running. It's just madness that they're not using thorium now. It's just that the industry evolved, that the financial interests meant you should be using the bad stuff. And back when it was evolving, they wanted the bad stuff so they could use it to build a whole lot of weapons. Now, the Russians, they're good salesmen, but would you buy a nuclear power plant off a Russian? Seriously, you know?
Right, synergy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't. Well, I mean, the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't believe them. I don't believe them.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying, if you believe the official, you know, mainstream media, which is questionable, but, you know, supposedly they've signed all these deals in the last 5 years for nuclear plants in different countries around the world. And I'm asking, is the technology they're planning to put in more or less the same as 20 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
Why? Oh, sorry. I'll stop emoting.
No, it's true.
No, I totally believe you. I'm just saying that obviously then it raises the question if the reason, let's say, Turkey, for example, might want these is they're hoping that 20, 30 years from now they might, you know, be able to build nuclear missiles or something. You know what I mean? There could be that thought behind it.
I don't think that's part of the thought. I think people are just hungry for power, and they really, really are. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure being placed on, you can't go and put a coal stack there, so we'll do nuclear. So you've got this mixture. You've got Germany decommissioning, a lot of Europe decommissioning their nuclear power plants. France doesn't know what to do because 60% of their power is nuclear. Australia, we sell most of uranium to the world, but we've banned nuclear power. There's an irony. We'll sell you the bad stuff, but we're not going to use it ourselves.
Well, your
principle. It's like a drug dealer. Yeah, we're like a good drug dealer. You know, hey, I never touched the coke, but you can have as much as you like. So that's the trouble. However, the world is still hungry for power, so they are still building coal-fired power stations. They are still doing nuclear, but the shift is coming. China now has put a cap on coal-fired power. They've now got peak coal, if you like, in China, saying within 2 or 3 years, you got to start pulling down your coal-fired power plants. No more new ones will be built, and we're putting a cap on coal imports, which really sucks for Australia. But that's what they're doing, and they're investing massive amounts into, you know, in China now, half the world's wind energy is being deployed there. That's the rest of the world combined, and there's a lot of big wind projects happening. Just go down to Texas and have a look, and half the world's wind energy. Their solar program is tenfold that of the US's. And Germany, and I could name about 10 other Asian countries, Thailand, even the Philippines now, they're all heading big time. But other countries, they're not as innovative. It's just easy to sign a contract with a bottle of vodka and a few loose Russian women. Hey, I will take your nuclear power plant. Do you trust a Turkish politician to do a true evaluation on the safety of a nuclear power plant? No. And it's just marketing, that's all. But I think that's changing. The paradigm shift is here now, and I think it's all going to be redundant within 15 years, 10 to 15 years. You will not see conventional nuclear, coal, or gas-fired power plants being built anywhere in the world.
Is there any news on that thorium plant?
Yes.
Can we go find, is it all hush hush, or can we actually find that it's working?
India brags about it. Just type in thorium and you'll see Norway, India. India, I think it's this year that it officially gets connected to the grid. They finished building it. So you can go and have a look at it. And India believes, I think, 30% of their power will be supplied by thorium within 30 years. So nothing's hush-hush. It's all out there in the open. China's a bit hush-hush, but they've put enormous resources against them. I don't know what America's doing. It's mainly left up to a few private startup companies like the Elon Musk type enterprises, and a few venture capitalists are playing with it. But China and India are definitely diving into the thorium absolutely big time. And I think it will merge. It's a generational change. It's not next year. It will take a generation to decommission existing infrastructure and bring in the safer nuclear.
Well, one question is why they aren't decommissioning these old things. I mean, Fukushima was past its lifespan, right?
They are now. They are, depending where you live in Europe, they're definitely getting rid of nuclear because they're sick of it.
Go Germany.
Yeah, go Germany.
Oh, yeah, of course. But I mean, I think they're still running in the States, for example, even though they must be well past their...
Well, I tell you what's going to cause them decommission. Nuclear energy, despite the promise in the 50s that, hey, this is free, is 2 or 3 times more expensive than existing like solar or wind or even coal-fired or gas-fired. So it's going to die an economic thing. And here's another big change. Big investment companies, banks like the European Development Bank and the Asian Development Bank here, which are massive banks, will not back coal-fired power plants and will not back fossil fuel mining operations anymore. They've pulled the plug on the finance. They will finance renewable energies. And it's not a political thing, it's an economic thing. They can see, it was like China saying, no more coal, we're going to get rid of it. Well, why would you go and back at a company that's going to build a coal mine that's not going to have any customers in 5 years' time? And what they're seeing is the returns on investment. Solar panels are down to 50 cents a watt, not in America, but the rest of the world, okay? 50 cents a watt, $1 a watt installed. So it's now cheaper. Saudi Arabia now building a 200 megawatt power plant because they can run it cheaper than oil-fueled power plants. Go figure that one out. So the Saudis they got the oil there, but they're putting in solar power plants. So what will drive the change is economics. And what you'll find is nuclear is getting too expensive. All they're doing now is trying to maximize their investment payback period. They still got paying off the bloody mortgage probably on the land that they built the nuclear power plant on 30 years ago. And until they've built the new power plants, they've still got to keep these things running. But I think thorium nuclear is the future, but normal nuclear I think is dead in the water within 10, 15 years because it's too expensive. It's just too expensive.
Hey, so that kind of segues into something I wanted to talk about, real legal, social, economic change. And, like I said, I run a nonprofit, a Linux nonprofit. I've been involved with Linux for 20 years, and it's been really awesome seeing it win. I mean, it's everywhere. It does everything. And one of the reasons for that is open source. And I'm kind of taking an open source towards everything kind of attitude. So it seems to me that one of the things that's in the way is patents. And you're in the unfortunate position of investigating people's inventions and seeing that they don't work. And I wanted to actually quote you from your last plane interview. You said, "Here's my dilemma," and then at a different time you said, "I can't win." And they both had to do with you being the bad guy when you see something, when you see something that isn't up to snuff. So it occurs to me that the Linux geeks have kind of solved this, in a way. It's a different situation, of course, because that's all based on copyright, and they use a license called the copyleft. Yeah, which is pretty, and that was all originally came from MIT, from Richard Stallman and GNU. But it occurs to me that there's something called the Linux Fund, and one of the things that they do is they accumulate a massive patent portfolio. So if anybody attacks open source developers, that they can turn around and attack back. So that's maybe the best we can do open source wise in the patent world. So what do you think about that, or maybe open sourcing patents, or something to make it at least, even if we can't make inventors who come up with great technologies rich every time, is it maybe better to make it so that they can work together and know that no one will steal their inventions from them and from the world? That's a huge lead-in. Sorry about that.
No, it's a very important point. You've got to understand what motivates people. Like, I'm in a company that, we got to commercially support the investors, so we sell the products in the West. But I want to bring about change at the lowest cost in the third world. And I'm motivated not by money, I'm motivated by people. But unfortunately, the majority of inventors and people working and researching energy technologies, most of them are actually, when you get down to it, when you really question them, they're about the money. I want $1 billion, I want this, I want that, I want that. But I think, they all say, I want to save the world, but I want $100 million too, So you go, oh yeah, okay. But I think what you touched on is something very important. It's the ability to share ideas and information and protect them in some way. And I think the Linux model might be able to be adopted to do that. But the biggest single problem I have, apart from inventions not working, is the other guys who say, I want $1 million in escrow for you to come and test it, and if it works, I want another $10 million. We can't do that. And otherwise, I'm going to die of the technology. Okay, fine. But other guys I deal with, it's a matter of they want to share, they want to learn, but they want to be protected as well. And it sometimes takes them, I've probably got 50 inventors I still talk to on the books, developing things that I think are impossible, but I introduce them to networks. And the hardest thing is bringing that trust. When can they disclose something they need to get advice on? At what point can they give that trust? And I think a network could be established where that could happen, that somehow they can be protected, or the membership of that are ethical and have gone through some sort of accreditation so they know they can be trusted. So I'm not sure exactly how to model this, but I think the Linux is something that probably has been pretty cool in the way it's gone about and shown a new model of moving forward of how to have intellectual property protected but still be open sourced.
It would be great if 3D printing came far enough along, of course, that it would become building things would become commodified, if I guess that's the word, commoditized, such as information has become. But I mean, barring that, it's going to require some kind of central organization because of the nature of how patents work. Anyway,
yeah, I think people are still a bit too paranoid with patents. People are going to get copied anyway. I mean, patents aren't recognised in India, so it depends what country you're in.
Right. Well, that's a very good point. Maybe that's why that'll be where good things come from.
Yeah, they're stealing all of China's ideas, so that's great.
Hey, Mark, for the good of us all, we want China and India competing. That's a win-win for the rest of us.
For Earth, yeah.
Or the Earth, or whatever. And if they're competing on things that are environmentally friendly, that's even better, so that we don't have even more destruction of the environment and the atmosphere and everything.
Here's something interesting. China is suffering from a big labour shortage, 1.3 billion, and they've got a labour shortage. The peasants are no longer coming from the countryside and working in the big factories. The cost of labour, I think the minimum wage in China will be the same as minimum wage in a US factory within 3 years, okay? And Chinese companies investing in the US at the moment because they think it's going to be, if you take the import duties and you take the taxes and you take the freight cost, it's going to be cheaper to manufacture in the US and distribute there than in China. But here's what's happening. Labour is still very, very, very cheap and available in India. So a lot of manufacturing is moving to India. It's moving to the Philippines, where the wages here are a third of what they are in China. And I was with some major factories this last week, and they were telling me the same story. They go away for Chinese New Year, the labour, they don't come back. And the government's got restrictions on how many Filipinos it can employ and all the rest. And the smart factories in the last 5 years have been automating. So the ones that have automated are okay. But when I talked to a factory and said, what's the biggest problem if we have to gear up production? They're saying getting the labour. And these factories have accommodation, they give them food, they give them shelter. And I'm not talking rough stuff, I'm talking really nice facilities, really spectacularly good facilities. But they can't attract the labour. And the labour costs, the daily labour costs are going through the roof. So as a country has a growing middle class, it comes that everybody's wages and everybody's conditions gets dragged up with that. So there's another big thing happening around the world now is India's winning big time because they're winning a lot of contracts because China's just getting too expensive.
Well, that, you brought up something I think is important. A lot of people in at least the U.S. have this vision that in China, in Chinese factories, they put these nets up so you can't jump and commit suicide. And I think that's a selective problem. I don't think that's the norm. What do you think?
I'm going to tell you, when I was driving in southern China recently, in Shenzhen and those areas, I'm on some of the best freeways in the world. I see some of the latest and most modern apartment blocks. And the factory I went to, the food was world class. The accommodation was still a bit crammed, I guess, but it looked like a new apartment block, out of, and these facilities are put in parks. The old sweatshop mentality, there are still sweatshops, don't get me wrong, there's still slums, but they're disappearing very, very fast. India's still probably got the sweatshops and the tin roofs and the appalling working conditions, but what's happening around the world is companies are getting more savvy that their consumers are saying, you can't use slave labour, you can't use child labour, you can't have this, you can't have that. So they're becoming a little bit more aware, and I think within the next 2 decades, those conditions will improve. But people really, really, really misread China. I mean, I sat there in a traffic jam and I thought I was in LA. The freeway looked the same, the apartment blocks looked the same. It's just that the people looked a little different. They weren't Mexican.
Exactly. The difference is they're not Mexican. So true, so true. Hey, before we wrap up today's show, I have a question for you. If you got into this to help people or to help, the countries or whatever, if you were approached by, successful people or a government from a poor, isolated country, right? Let's say, Armenia, or I don't know, Paraguay. Well, I don't know how, the Paraguay, okay. But you know what I'm trying to say. Places that are probably shafted geographically, right? They don't have good ocean access. They don't necessarily, you know what I mean? They're not next to oil, and you know what I mean? So everything's a hassle, right? No gas pipelines, you know what I mean? Nothing good, right? What would you be, how should they approach it if you were giving them advice?
You'll always find some resource there. It could be geothermal, it could be sunshine, it could be wind, it could be something. The advice, if you can't find something, like you're saying it's a real head case, I'm not sure where that would be, but the advice I'd be giving them is get friendly with somebody, your neighbour who's got what you need. One of the interesting things was I studied recently was Singapore, and they were relying on Malaysia a lot for water and everything else. And when they're trying to be independent, Malaysia says they'll be fine. They'll do what we tell them to, and we'll turn the water off. So what Singapore did, they got very independent on water very, very quickly. same as energy and everything else. I don't know the answer to your question. I really, really don't, because it's very hypothetical, and you've got to see really what the crux of the problem is. I think you need to define the problem a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if nowadays, like, if they don't have geothermal, then, or, huge dams or something, perhaps solar is now practical for a lot of these countries, that were geographically isolated before.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Jim Dunn, he's down in, or he's just recently been to South America, helping them build solar factories. So they're not only just going to import the cheap Chinese, they're going to import components, of course, they can't make, technical components. But what's happening now is the manufacturing, the finishing off and the distribution is they're going in, and he went into one of those countries you mentioned, actually. I think it was sponsored by the government, to go in and show them how to be self-sufficient in producing these technologies for themselves. And they've got ridiculously cheap. I mean, the cost of a solar panel now, the actual piece of glass and the aluminium surround costs more than the cells that are inside. You can't get any lower. You can get a bit lower. So they're teaching countries how to if they haven't got the resources, how to get involved in obtaining the resources in the most economical way. And the other thing that happens in those countries, the head cases I call them, the NGOs are coming in and they're going to be assisting greatly. And that's something I'm seeing worldwide now, is banks. One client we're looking at, it's a bank, they want to spend 15 million euros to make sure this technology gets into those companies. So you're seeing a lot more socially and ethically responsible corporate citizens now genuinely coming in saying, we want to help those countries. I don't know what's motivating them to do that, but they are definitely more and more and more becoming more evident all the time. The biggest threat with those countries is the political situation. I mean, look in the news at the moment. Half of Africa is trying to flee and catch boats to Europe. And it's not from one country, it's from dozens of countries, because they're so politically unstable. And look at the Middle East now. You don't need the Americans going in causing a war. They're all just shooting at each other now, and there's tremendous upheaval. So I don't know what the future is, but in the energy world, to leave you on a very positive note, you're about to see a massive paradigm shift, and it's already started, and it's coming your way real fast. And it's renewable resources now. It's a generational change. It'll take 2 generations, but it's started now. The actual stampede for renewable energies is driven economically, not by governments, but it's actually driven by economics. And when we have the storage capability that is economically viable, your world will change. Simple as that. It's very positive.
That's awfully positive. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Well, I tell you what, before we wrap it up, Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, I just have one more question. So this is a company I've been following for the past few years, V3 Solar. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but I was just curious if you had heard of them and what was your take. Everything I've seen seems viable.
Yeah, I think they got some very good ideas. I think it's viable. There are probably 30 solar technologies, and I use solar, that the variable, we look at solar PV we're talking about now, but the other solar technologies are coming through that can convert heat into hydrogen and can do this and that. And that particular one I think is very viable, and I think that they're a little bit ambitious, but I think they'll be able to do what they want to do in the near future. You know what it all gets down to? Money. Who's providing the money? What's the business model? And what's the economic drivers? That's what brings the paradigm shift. Governments can initiate, but governments can't follow through. Look what's happened with all the energy sectors. The governments now can't afford to continue to subsidise alternative energy, but they don't need to, because now the alternative energies are cheaper than fossil fuels. And what's happening is the fossil fuel industry is going back to the government now and saying, how can we penalise these people because they're killing us? So it's gone this full circle. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, but it's all very, very positive. But that particular technology, yeah, going ahead, and I think it's very viable.
Okay, great.
I think you'll see a lot more diversity coming because windmills, seriously, there must be 100 windmills that aren't like the ones you're seeing now under development. Much more efficient, cleaner, better, and all the rest. You know, General Electric invested in wind power because it's the fastest growing and most profitable division in the company. There's an economic driver. They weren't trying to be good for the environment. They just wanted to make money, and wind power is a way there. So if there's an economic driver, the paradigm shift will happen. That's why nuclear will eventually disappear. Nuclear is just too expensive.
Yeah,
Okay.
I can imagine. I hope the wind power, I hope they're protecting the birds better. I got the impression that some of those were pretty bad news for birds. Is that...
The new wind technologies coming out do protect the birds. And I think you're going to see a huge... the next big one's going to be ocean or wave technology. There's some power plants just fired up in Australia, large ones that are wave powered.
Ooh.
And suddenly wave power...
Are they using Wells turbines or something else?
Yeah, they're using things that bob around in the waves, create the pressure.
It's in the water. Okay, sorry.
No, the pressure generation's in the water, but the turbines are on land. So they just got the pressure being generated by the waves, transferred by hydraulic hoses or pneumatic hoses, and the turbines are just normal dry land turbines. But they failed in the past because you're right, they tried to put the generator capacity in the water, and of course the ocean's very corrosive, very angry, and you've got all your parts bobbing around. This way it's all offshore. And they've come up with a model that's very economical and very reliable because the only bit they've got is a little pump physically, you know, creating the pressure. And the good thing with wave energy over solar and wind, it's always there. It's 24 hours a day. And they're powering, I think, a naval base with it now. So I think you're going to see a lot more wave energy appearing because they've now woken up saying, we got the model wrong, let's try it this way. Geothermal too, not in the States, but in Asia. Anybody on the Pacific, what do they call it, the rim of fire, those countries are really investing heavily in geothermal. And Japan actually, by the way, is investing very heavily in renewables. It's just they're having to fire up the old nuclear power plants because the industry needs it right now. So I think I'm very optimistic. The thing you won't see, and if you read revolution-green.com, we still bust the scam artist, and unfortunately in the free energy circles, a scam artist appears every month, literally, with the latest way to fleece some money off people.
But some of them, they're just, you know, blasts from the past. They were doing something different 25 years ago, and then they come back for another run.
Yeah, but they're gradually dying out. They're getting recycled more frequently, and then people lose interest. It's just, you know, you see the same old over and over and over and over again. And eventually these guys are either being put in jail or people just have lost interest. You can only cry wolf so many times. Look, don't get me wrong. I wish somebody would come up with a solution tomorrow, and I wish it was a backyard inventor who invented a magnetic motor. The reality is it probably won't happen.
Yeah, but then, as you said, there are all these massive positive things going on. So let's focus on developing those. Hey, Mark, before we wrap it up, is there anything else that you want to bring to everyone's attention, your website or anything else?
The website was actually owned by a mate of mine in America, and we have a few contributors. I do it to relax my brain and keep up with things as a hobby. One thing I'm really excited about, and tell me if I mentioned it early in the program, I think I did, is I'm really excited about making these alternative energies available to everybody, because let's face it, if the model at the moment with the solar power, is if you own a house, you can put it on and you go through a whole lot of rigmarole to get it on and you connect to the grid. But we're doing a solar farm here, and I may have mentioned earlier in the program, but that really excites me that the model we're using is that if you live in New York, a high-rise, or anywhere in the world, anywhere, or you move house or you're on a rented property, you don't have to invest in the infrastructure or go through the hassle of dealing with the utility and the government and all the rest. You can buy a panel, and the income from that panel will either be accredited to your electricity account or will be given to you as a financial reward. So it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to benefit from your solar panels. And because we can put them in the ground in a farm situation and the land's been donated, the cost is half of what it would cost you to put them on your house anyway. And you can move wherever you like in the country or wherever you want to be, and it doesn't matter which utility company you use, your solar will come with you. And people can buy from one panel, if they just got a little hut, right through to multinational corporations, figure out, hey, they've already got the land, they've got the labour, we can build a solar farm for 2/3 of the cost if we do it ourselves. So we're trying to create a model that all of these energies become available to everybody, because at the moment, solar and not so much wind, but solar and wind are just owned by the utilities or lucky household holders. That's it. We want to empower the whole world to be able to access that. And this is about building new models. Like you mentioned the Linux model before, we're trying to do not the same as a Linux model, but build a new model that means power for all the people, not just power for the corporations.
Well, let's hope we can get there. Yeah, that sounds very good. Okay, well, that'll do it for this time. Mark, thanks so much for your time and coming, and we hope people can go to your website and get some ideas. And of course, we're looking forward to your line of products when they finally get out.
I'm looking forward to coming out. I can have
and you're really looking forward to that, right? Okay, that's it, folks. It's a wrap. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, bye.